Hey, what up, YouTube? It's just me back again. This is part 2 of the CSS page design video. In the last one, we got up to this bit, okay, which is basically making that background container. So now, of course, what we need to do is work out how the heck to do the rest of this thing, okay, which is that basic mock-up that we've got in Illustrator. All right, so let's get on with it. The next part really to tackle is the header, okay, which is this graphic up here. All right, so we'll start, in fact, by grabbing the graphic that we need to use, which is this part in here. I explained the slices before, so I'm simply just going to go in and use this feature of Illustrator. You can actually do exactly the same thing in Photoshop. And it's this Save for Web and Devices option. Okay, and this is where the slices that we made becomes useful. And in the dialog box that opens, I'm just selecting that top graphic. And the only thing I need to be concerned about now is what type of file would be the best for this. And the way to sort that out is simply just look down at the file size, which down here is telling me as a GIF file, it's 14.82 kilobytes, and as a JPEG it's 44. That's pretty big. Let's not do that. We'll go back to a GIF file, and I can change the number of colors that it's using. If I choose more colors in the GIF, it's going up slightly, but theoretically the quality of the image would be improving a bit. Because I've got a fair few different pixels in this part here, I'm going to use that. Okay, I'm just going to export it as a GIF file, 64 colors, and save. And I'm going to make sure that I am navigating to the folder that I'm working with for my HTML file. I'm just going to give this a new name, which is header. And so that I know what it is, I'm using fairly logical names. And I'm just making sure in this dialog box here that it's using images only and the selected slice. So it's only going to send out the picture that I've clicked on and not all the other bits and pieces from that file. Okay, there it goes. And then back to Dreamweaver now. So what we need to do now is create the div that's going to contain that header. So we already got our big container, so we'll go through exactly the same process of making the header div. Just insert a div tag. Now this is the point at which we need to be a little bit more careful about where we're placing things. Okay, so this time I'm just going to put the name in there, which is header. I'm going to call it header, which is a logical name. And I need to be careful which one of these I'm now choosing. Okay, I want to make sure this is being inserted at exactly the right place. And in this case, I want it to be after the start of the tag container, which means it's going to put it inside the container div. Okay, if I chose after the tag container, it would put it after the container, so it would put it right underneath the bottom of the page. So I don't want that. I want it sitting inside my container. So after the start of the tag container. And there it is. And once again, we just make a corresponding rule for that now. So going into my CSS styles and choose an ID, because we're working with IDs. Use the hash and put in the actual same name that I gave that div, which is header. Okay. And off we go. And start to put in any style rules that we need for this. So I happen to know that from our Illustrator graphic, we're working with a width of 800 and we're working with a height of 240. But no, you say, we were using 1024. Yes, we were. I'm deliberately making this one a little bit thinner because I just want to show you another feature of working with these divs when you're putting some content in, because we're going to be putting an image inside this. So I just want to show you two ways of centering things. Okay, I don't need to declare a color for this because it's already going to pick up the color of our container div. Okay, so let's hit apply to that, and let's have a quick look at that. There's our div sitting there. The header is here. You can see the dotted line telling us where that is. and then I'm going to insert the picture. Okay, so I'll just use the top insert menu and make sure I'm going to the right folder, okay, which is the CSS demo folder which I'm working in. There's my header that I exported. Choose. And it's always a good idea to give all your images an alt text for assistive readers. I'm just going to give the name of the thing I'm working with, so just header. And there it is. It pushes it down a bit because it's got that placeholder text inside the div, so I'll just remove that now. And that's sitting quite well. However, it's not quite what we want, all right, because basically it's sitting over to its default position, which is the left-hand side. It always goes to the left-hand sort of edge whenever you place things. Now we want to tell both the image and the header div to center inside our container box. So to do that, we can use similar process to we used before. I'm going to go and edit the header rule that we made, and I'm going to use that same technique of setting auto right and left margin, okay, which is that. And that's fixed the header div itself, but our picture is still off to one side. So I'll still continue to edit the header rule. And this time I'm just going to use the block tab and set text align to center. And it fixed it, and you might wonder, well, why did that work? That's not text, it's a picture. Well, in this case, text align is applying to any content that's sitting inside the div. Okay, so it's a picture in this case, but it's still applying center to that. So effectively, it centered it. So if I click on that div, we can actually see it's putting that auto margin on either side of the container because it's relative to the container because it's sitting inside that. And then our picture itself is centered inside that. So that's what we want it to do. Fabulous. Let us now move on to the next bit, okay, which is the navigator bar. Okay, so this is pretty much done the same way. In this case, we're going to need those three buttons, okay, because they're graphic buttons because it's using a fancy font. So I'll start once again by exporting those out of Illustrator using the Save for Web and Devices option. And I'm just making sure that I am clicking only on those bits, okay? So I'm not clicking on the header this time, clicking on those three things. Use the same process again, just check to see what's going to give me the smallest file size. In this case, I've only got a few colours here. I've got that main purple colour, I've got white, and there'll be a few sort of fuzzy pixel colours around the type there to make it smooth looking. So I'm not going to need a JPEG. A GIF will be fine. And I mean, we're only talking 1.9K, so that's very small. So I'm just going to use that setting there for the ease of this demo. Okay, so hit save. And I've navigated to the same folder, which means it will put it inside the images folder that it already made, which is exactly where I want it because I want all my images in the same spot. And I'm choosing images only and selected slices once again. I'll just modify the file name to nav because these are my nav buttons. I might even call them nav btn and save. Back to Dreamweaver. And now we just use, once again, same process as we've been using, and this time we'll just make a div that's going to contain those buttons. So insert div tag, and I'm going to call this navbar. Now again, I need to be careful about how I'm positioning this, so I'm going to tell this to appear after the tag header. Okay, so this differs from what we did last time. Because we've got now another div that's sitting inside our container, it's called header, I can safely just tell this navbar to appear after the tag header, and I'll know that it will still be sitting inside container. Okay, so these things do matter, these before, after, start, and you do have to understand what they mean. Okay, if you don't quite get them, they are worth experimenting with until you know what they're going to do. Okay, in this case, after tag. All right, and there it is. Once again, make a rule for it. And it's an ID, and it's called navbar. Okay, so I'm using exactly the same spelling. I'm putting my hash in front so that it knows it's the ID rule for that div. And this time around, we're using the navbar goes right across the container we've got. So I don't need to declare a width for it because it'll pick that up, but I do need to declare a height, and I'm going to use a height of 30 pixels. Okay, so that's working well so far. And I'll now bring in my images. So it's kind of doing the same process we were using for the header. Okay, so I just insert. I've made sure, actually I am carefully selecting inside the navbar that I just made. Insert, image, and there's my buttons I just made. It's automatically going to the right folder. And I'll call that nav1 in the alt tag. I'll just put them next to each other. So I'm just clicking to the right of that last picture to insert the next one. This one's nav2. And insert the final one, nav3. There we go. Okay, now that's looking a little bit funky in that it's sort of not really centered and there's a few weird things going on. Okay, the only weird thing going on there is there's still some placeholder text inside that div, okay, which is the stuff that says content for ID navbar goes here. I can delete that. My buttons then go off to one side, okay, and that's exactly what the header was doing. So all I need to do is go into the navbar rule and simply go in and tell the same thing I did for the header, okay, just tell the box settings, sorry, the block setting there to have text align centered so that those elements, which in this case is my picture buttons, appear in the dead center of that. And then the final thing I need to do there is just declare a background color, okay, for the rest of that box, and I'm just going to get it to sample that color, okay. But there's a little minor problem going on there, and this is a little bug that's in Dreamweaver. When I select that, it's telling me the color is 992FCC, and apply that. If we have a look at that in live view, okay, I'm not sure if you'll see that on the video, but it's actually changed the color from what we're seeing, so you can actually see there's a difference. And I'm not really sure what causes that problem, but anyway, the way to fix it is just go back and double check what the color actually was in Illustrator. Okay, so I'm just checking the palette and it tells me it was 9900CC. Okay, so that's the color I actually need to declare in Dreamweaver to make sure that my background panel will be exactly the same. So 9900CC. So just go and turn off live view, edit my navbar rule by double clicking it. Okay, and set the background to 9900CC. And just a quick check in live view will show us that that's now working fine. Okay, so there we go. Now we are on to the next part, which is basically the main content. Now just to explain what we're going to do there, let's have a look at this. If I put those overlays back on, I'll just turn off my slices. It will give hopefully a clear explanation of what's happening here. I want to make sure that my content, which is my left sub-navigation and my text content, is appearing essentially centered, which is going to be lining up underneath the rest of this stuff here. Okay, I don't want it going right out to the very edge of my 1024 space. I want to contain it inside this 800 wide space. So to do that, because I want two separate columns essentially here, okay, so one column there, and I want them to actually sit in the right spot, I'm going to make one big div, okay, that's 800 wide, and I'm going to nest those two columns inside that div. Okay, and that way it's going to be easier to control where they're sitting, because I can just put that same approach I've been using on the main box division here, which is just to use the auto margins to align it in center, and then those things will just be nested inside and they can't float outside of that, so they'll be contained by that box. Okay, so essentially it's going to be three divs, one big one and two sitting inside the main content one. Okay, so let's go do that. Oh, and incidentally, I don't now need to export any more graphics from the Illustrator page, because I can make all this stuff in Dreamweaver. I can simply do this as HTML text, including the text color and everything. Okay, so we're essentially finished with the Illustrator document. I'll leave it for reference though, so I can just get a guide as to whether the sizes are correct for what I'm doing. Okie dokie. And we might leave it there for video 2, and we'll come back for the final video to see how that was done.